Hello, Lazio all over the world. Welcome to another episode of Lazio Lounge. It's season review, so special episode. And for this reason, we are joined by Shawn McIntosh. How's Shawn? How's everything there?
Great. How are you guys?
Yeah, not bad. A little bit hot, right, Alasdair? I know you're used to the Rome weather, but it's hot.
I don't know. I've still not got used to this. Yeah, it's probably not that interesting for people to listen to me complaining about hot days, but tough because I'm probably going to do that continuously throughout the episode. I've had to close the window to not let the street noise in, so I'm even hotter now.
Yeah, finally. We celebrate yesterday 5 years of Lazio Lounge, so this is going to be a special episode. Season review, a lot of things to talk about. We published the poll last week to have your opinion on, the Lazio Lounge Awards for this season just finished. Alasdair, before we start, we didn't talk about our review of the season. Lazio finished fifth above Roma, 6 points behind Juventus, so not that far away from the Champions League spot. Let's start with you. What's your take on this season from Lazio?
Well, a kind of overall assessment. I think pretty good generally. I think I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10 because it's. I said at the very start of the season I thought top 6 would be a good result considering all the changes that were taking place, the transition in style and personnel, the massive changes in the summer, and also the squad we started the season with. We already knew wasn't really well equipped enough to deal with Europa League campaign and Coppa Italia on top of that. So to have a similar kind of season, I mean, we actually finished obviously 1 place higher than last year despite having fewer points. But I think the most important thing for me above all was that we saw improvement as the year went on. I think when you have this new coming in, when you have a new squad coming together, the thing you want to feel like when you're ending the season is that there's a bright future or that you're actually building towards something. And I think if we look back at the first half of this season, which was so up and down with crazy results happening, both good ones and terrible ones, we've seen a lot more consistency second half. We've seen a lot more of Sarri's playing style coming through. And yeah, I do feel optimistic in terms of what's happening on the pitch. Off the pitch is obviously a different question. So yeah, in answer to the question, yeah, 5th place I think is a good result.
Shawn, your take?
Yeah, I mean, look, you always want to win trophies, and something that we've done a nice job of in recent years is when we struggle in some way, shape, or form, we tend to come out of a season with a trophy. So I think looking at it in that way, it's a bit disappointing. But to Alasdair's point, when you start filling in all the context, new manager, our transfer window that was very disappointing, the ups and downs, you really look overall across the league, and there was a lot of clubs that struggled. You look at how Juve started their season and a lot of challenges across the league. And many might say that, in terms of the strength of Serie A, this was a down year for the league. And so given all of that, given our shakeup, given the lack of investment made into the club, new manager, players absolutely struggling. You look at players that saw their worst form in recent years with the likes of Acerbi. And to take all that, I mean, we've talked about our center back position every single year. It's the biggest area of need. And for our strongest center back to have his worst year on top of all the other issues in that, and to still find ourselves in 5th, maintaining the consistency of seeing ourselves in European competition for a 3rd consecutive year, finishing ahead of Roma, given all of their investments and the special one, I think we can be pretty happy. And I think for the first time in quite some time, it does seem like there is a start to something that we can be excited about. Given a lot of things that still need to happen, but I think we left the season very positive. So yes, I would say really, really positive season all in all.
Let's start with the Lazio Lounge Awards then. Signing of the season. Shawn, this time you start. who do you think was the signing of the season? We did a poll with Pedro, Zaccagni, Felipe Anderson, and Basic. We didn't mention Luca Romero and Isai, but who do you think was the signing of the season?
It's nice that this is actually a debate and a conversation to be had, because I don't know that it's been a little bit since we've had that. So for me, I will go with Zaccagni. You know, and it's a tough one. I think we're kind of splitting hairs between he and Pedro, but for me, Zaccagni was a little bit more of a surprise, especially given how he started with the club. You know, he was a player that filled an area of need for us and knew our league. But honestly, with the way he was able to fit in, giving us something that I think we hadn't seen in a while, with his directness, the way that he was able to find himself involved in goals, whether it was directly or through assists, and then the attitude that I thought he brought. You know, so oftentimes I felt like, you know, we talk about Felipe Anderson, you know, either being a player or finding himself invisible in matches. I think Zaccagni was quite the opposite. More often than not, I mean, he was very direct and he gave us life. So for me, you know, given the investment level in him and finding himself now a part of the Azzurri mix, I think for me, he's a player that would be the signing of the season, because it looks as if he'll be a big part of this club for a number of years to come.
Alasdair, the first time that we have so many options for signing of the season, right? Is exciting.
Yeah, I mean, they're all in one position is the only problem. But anyway, I'm going to try and keep this positive. Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that they did rebuild the attack last summer to try and, you know, turn a team that had no wingers into a team that plays 4-3-3, I think that was one of many worries we had about the squad rebuilds, and it's gone really well. The fact that Zaccagni, Anderson, and Pedro are all on this list, and you mentioned Romero, who's obviously not made it, but is another exciting kind of one coming through the ranks. I think that's really positive. I mean, I voted for Pedro. I went with the masses here. Pedro did win the award, 48%. But because I just think he's been absolutely remarkable business. I mean, it's easy to forget, but, you know, looking back to last summer, the first player to cross the Rome divide in 40 years, I think there was a lot of questions asked about whether that's a good idea, and at that age, what's the point? He hadn't been that impressive at Roma. And then for him to come in, have the season he's had, which has been his best for 5 years, I think, with 9 goals, scoring against Roma in the derby, then scoring the goal against Verona that made sure that we finished ahead of Roma. I mean, it's just been a great story, and he's really excelled under Sarri. I think that he's helped the rest of the forward line improve as well. So yeah, I mean, I need to be Pedro, free transfer as well. You know, I've not been saying this a lot.
Alasdair, can I
take your hat off to Tare for once? I think you have to do it.
Can I add one more note to hopefully strengthen Zaccagni? You mentioned a player to cross the Rome divide, but our friend Zaccagni seems to have done that when it comes to Zaniolo. And so, you know, I just want to throw that out there. Another reason for a vote for Zaccagni.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, I mean, this is an encouraging part. In the past, we only had like one candidate and the others weren't there because summer transfer was usually awful. I think, and we mention it often, considering the last 4 years, this was the first summer transfer that was encouraging. So some good signing and not one and then all the others embarrassing. So that was definitely encouraging. We didn't mention Basic, that didn't have a great season, but I would say that as he was playing the same position as Luis Alberto and Milinkovic Savic, didn't have that many chances to play. So looking forward, I think he's going to have more time to play probably.
I'm surprised you're not giving it to Kamenovich, Vittorio.
Yeah, player. I completely forgot about Kamenovich. Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, well, the second half of Lazio Verona, he was much better than Luis Felipe. So yeah, we should have given credit to him. I don't want to talk about some transfer market because there are rumors about Kamenovich. We're going to do next week. I'm very good in this. Going forward, the flop of the season, we have 4 options there. Acerbi, I'm sorry, Sean, Isai, Luis Felipe, or Pepe Reina. Alasdair, what was your option?
So yeah, this is one of 2 where I've gone against the public opinion. I actually went for Luis Felipe, whereas Husai won this comfortably, 50%. Which, I mean, I get it. You know, he's obviously been disappointing. Husai came in, I guess, with an expectation that he would fit into this team a lot more easily, and he wasn't one we had to worry about compared to some of the others. Given that he was coming in to do a job he's done for years, to play under a coach he already knows, to play in a league he already knows, it didn't seem like a big change for him. And his performances haven't been great. Obviously, he's lost his place in the second half of the season as well. But I just thought Luis Felipe, this was his year. You know, I thought this was the time for him to actually step up and become the player that we kind of thought he could become, and be this kind of consistent, impressive centre back alongside Acerbi. Kind of in the back of my mind at the start of the season, I hoped he kind of passed the torch on to Felipe this year, and he could really improve on the kind of promise that he's already shown. But it's obviously not happened that way. I mean, even before the transfer stuff and his contract running out and him ultimately leaving the club, he still wasn't performing that impressively other than the odd game, which is what we've seen him always do. So for me, I gave it to Felipe for that reason, because I felt like of the 4, he was the one with the highest ceiling, and he was the one who was furthest away from achieving his potential, I guess.
Sean, do you agree?
Well, I think you may have sold me on switching my answer. Alasdair. I had Husai, and for many of the reasons you said, I think when Sarri was announced and we knew we were switching formations, I looked at a couple key signings as being absolutely critical to this transition, and Husai being a big part of that, knowing his system, knowing that we needed that position on the left field. He came in having played in Serie A. And so for me, I especially, I think in the first 2 matches, he played quite well. And so for him to go from that to an absolute, pariah. I mean, he was a player that we, often sparked feelings of what Patrick used to do for us. And, it was quite disappointing. But, when I think of everything that has to go into Luis Felipe, with how much of a part he was with his youth. He was always supposed to be that next great center back for us. And for obviously him to have struggled for much of this season, and a season in which he played, I think the biggest knock on him had always been his availability. And for us to see him and to not quite play at the highest level we always expected he would, and then to obviously finish it off with leaving on a free, you can't help but be absolutely disappointed in his story in our shirt, because I always expected and thought so much more of him. So, disappointing with his performances on the pitch, but even more disappointing is the way it all ends.
I want to point out that of the 4 players selected, they are all defenders. Acerbi, Isai, Felipe, Reina is a goalkeeper. I mean, do we read something in that? I mean, best player, all attackers, strikers, wingers, worst player, all defenders. Do you read something in that?
And also the most even split of the votes as well, I think. So people actually were able to make a case for all 4, which wasn't the case, I don't think, with the rest of the polls. But yeah, obviously it does. I mean, who did you vote for, Vittorio?
Well, I voted for Isai. I thought he was, as you were mentioning, I was expecting more from him. I mean, he should have been the one teaching the others, right? He's been with Sarri at Empoli and Napoli, so you would expect him to coach the others. And I thought at the beginning of the season, he started well. But if you remember, at the end of the season, Sarri would prefer to start Radu than Isai. I mean, if he had, I don't know, maybe a Primavera guy available, he would have started instead of Isai. This tells you a lot about the player performance. So I think That's why I vote him. I agree with all the others. I mean, Acerbi, worst season at Lazio. Luis Felipe, as you mentioned, we were all hoping to see improvement. Reina, what can I say? I mean, I think it's years we are talking about Reina, saying he's more midfielder than a goalkeeper. He finished the season with 1 assist, but I mean, goal conceded from Reina were far too much. So yeah, I thought his eye got my vote, and yeah, stick with it. Most improved player. Now this is.
Can I just quickly interrupt?
No.
I just think we should probably, actually, as we're doing this, tell people what the actual award is, like what the results are.
Yeah, I thought you.
I don't think we've been doing this so far. So the flop of the season is El Said Husai and the Lazio Lounge Awards, and the signing of the season was Pedro. There you go. Sorry, I just thought we should make this clear as we go along.
Yeah, you mentioned it in your comments, so I thought it was useless to repeat. But let's move to most improved player. We have Felipe Anderson, Manuel Lazzari, Danilo Cataldi, and Patrick. Shawn?
It's of all the awards, I think this one is the most clear cut. It has to be Patrick because simply he was the one player probably starting from further back than anybody else. He has nowhere else to go but up, and not that his progression was minimal either. I mean, he finished the season as a very serviceable player. And I maybe am his biggest critic. Seeing Patrick in our starting 11 always brought about a little bit of discomfort for myself, and hated seeing him. And for us to get to a point where he was maybe our best center back, so oftentimes, and bit scary to think that. I'm a bit nervous to see how that does affect our transfers in the upcoming window, but I've got to say, hats off to him because he embraced the new challenge of Sarri. Maybe it gave him a fresh opportunity, a clean slate, but he was quite useful in a lot of areas that we needed, and I think for me it was quite clear.
Alasdair?
Yeah, same for me. I mean, it's the first thing that comes to mind with this is really that you were just pointing out, Vittorio, in the last one, that all 4 flop of the season candidates were defenders, which perhaps kind of aids Patrick in his ability to be named the most improved player. I think he did improve. I do think that, but I also think the catastrophic season that everyone around him had kind of heightened the reputation that he got throughout the season. I still think he has big weaknesses in big games. I still think he's a useful squad player, and I'd like him to stick around so that he could be, in my mind, ideally the 4th choice centre back who can be rotated in league games against mid to low table teams.
Not the 3rd, the 4th.
The 4th.
So not the first substitution, the second one.
Exactly. This is talking about an ideal world. But no, you do have to take your hat off to him. He did have some great performances as the season went on. He stood up, and yeah, he was the best centre back in this Lazio team this season. It's not a great reflection on the season we've had defensively, but there we are. I think he's definitely the player who's improved most.
Yeah, shocking that he's our one center back that's sticking around too after all these years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I mention even the other players? Because Manuel Lazzari, a lot of Lazio had doubts that he could adapt to the 4-man defense. I thought in the second part of the season, he improved a lot. He played really well. So that was really encouraging. And I have to be honest, I voted Patrick, but I thought even the improvement of Manuel Lazzari were evident. Danilo Cataldi, I don't know, guys. I don't know if, because end of the season, he started playing a lot. I don't know if it because Sarri understood that Leva wasn't staying and so said, well, maybe Leva is thinking of something else. Let's start Cataldi. Or because Cataldi really deserved to play more because he was the better player. I don't know about that. But I thought Cataldi as well made improvements. And overall, we have to say that every Lazio player had to improve because switching to the 3-5-2 of Inzaghi to a 4-3-3 of Sarri was a massive change for pretty much everybody. It said Inzaghi, who said did awful. So I thought overall, probably all the Lazio players improved this season. Too optimistic, or do you agree with me?
That all the Lazio players improved this season.
Well, they have to adapt to it. Well, not the players in the list of the flop of the season, but all the others probably.
All right, okay. I mean, that's quite a lot of them.
Yeah, I'd say, I think there was a healthy mix of players that improved, and I do think that there were a couple that stayed stagnant. I don't know that Luis Alberto is a player that improved, or necessarily that got worse. I think he's a player that was, for the most part, relatively stagnant, had his moments, but very similar to seasons past. Certainly gave us moments of frustration too, where he didn't have the impact that we expect of him. Most certainly, I think a Milinkovic-Savic is one that improved, which is pretty hard to do given how quality of a player he's been. And I think Cheeto is Cheeto. I don't know that he's necessarily one that improved. I think he's the model of consistency. But I think there's a good amount of players, especially we listed them at that center back position, that outside of Patrick, we're all taking step backwards.
Just for Alasdair, the most improved player, Patrick won. 71% of you voters vote for Patrick. Shall we move to player of the season, guys?
What about the match?
We do the match later. Come on.
Okay, sorry.
Player of the season. Alasdair decided to just have two options. So, Milinkovic-Savic or Ciro Immobile. Who did you vote, Shawn?
Well, this one, I said the Patrick choice was the easiest one. This one most certainly was the most difficult. I think slight edge for me has to go with Milinkovic-Savic, given, again, while Cheeto was absolutely consistent and, led the league in scoring once again. Pretty incredible that regardless of manager, regardless of system style, he continues to bag goals in this league. But what I saw from Milinkovic was everything that we've wanted from him, all phases of the game. I think he played in more matches than Cheeto. Cheeto was bit by a little bit more injury than seasons prior. That contributing both from double-digit goals to double-digit assists. I believe Who Scored had him with the third highest ranking in the league, in leading all of Lazio in that category. So for me, seeing what he was able to do in a new system, I mean, we saw his impact, and more importantly was when you think about the players around him, especially in that midfield, with Leva kind of taking a step back, Luis Alberto not necessarily being at his best. I think more was put on Milinkovic-Savic's shoulders, and he responded quite well. So for me, he was the MVP.
Alasdair?
Yeah, I mean, I also went with Sergei. I think, to be honest, simply the fact that Ciro has won a fourth Capocannoniere, scored 27 goals in the league, and still doesn't get it. And actually not even that close. Sergei won this with 71%, which surprised me. It was as one-sided as it was. But I think that just goes to show what a year he's had. I mean, it's been phenomenal. I mean, he's been phenomenal all along, but he's just taken it to another level this year. He's just a wonderful man. He can do absolutely everything. I don't like to generally, get too emotionally invested in other people naming their players or teams of the season, but I did get a bit wound up with one, which was Opta leaving him out. Yeah. And the reason for that was that their statistical database And so their team of the season is entirely based on statistics. And they've left out the guy who's got 11 goals, 11 assists. Only 3 players in the league had double figures for both. He's a top scoring midfielder. And on top of that, he was second for just run per match. It's always behind Brozovic because he always runs further than everyone. And then he was in the top 10 for ball recovery. So he's literally doing everything. He's covering every blade of grass. He's winning the ball back. He's creating goals. He's scoring goals. He's been absolutely phenomenal in every way. And they put Fabian Ruiz in their team. So that annoyed me. But he has been an unbelievable player. And, the reception he's getting from the fans, I think that, again, we're worried about if it's goodbye or not, but I think the way that his legend has been even more kind of cemented this year with the way he's been performing, and he is just an absolute other level player that we're never going to be able to replace if he does go. So massive credit to him. And every time as well, I should also mention one more thing. There's been some attempts this season to try and destabilize him a little bit with these interviews that didn't happen with his agent, and that's never been allowed to happen. That's been snuffed out every single time, and that is a continuation of something that's happened all the way through his time at Lazio, which is he is not destabilizing, he is not angling to leave the club. Whenever he has something to say about the club, it's positive, and everyone loves him. Teammates, fans, coaches, everyone. So he deserves massive credit for that as well, because he's wanted.
I'm surprised that Sergei won with 71% of votes because, Ciro top scorer again, leader of the team, the captain, etc. And I thought that while Ciro started as usually very well, Milinkovic the first couple of months were struggling to adapt to the new type of football he was playing. So I thought there could be a better competition there. But, Sergei, I think the best midfielder in Europe. So it's unbelievable that he's still with us. I don't know if he will leave this summer because I don't know if anybody can make the offer he wants, but we'll see. Finally, match of the season. We have the derby, obviously, Lazio-Roma 3-2, Lazio-Inter 3-1, Fiorentina-Lazio 0-3, and Spezia-Lazio 3-4. Starting with Alasdair this time. What did you vote?
Well, this was my second one where I've gone against the public because I went for the Inter game, the 3-1 game. It's a tough one. It could have gone either way with the derby, to be honest, but I voted with my head over my heart, I guess. I just think it was a bigger moment because it felt like the first real example of this team showing what they can be at their full potential. And it's a bigger scalp, like beating that Roma team narrowly versus beating the champions of Italy with by far the best squad in Italy. Still think they do, even though they didn't win the Scudetto. And coming from behind to do that as well, and I think that, honestly, that set precedent for the whole season. Lazio won 20 points from losing positions this year, which only Inter did better in. So for them to come from behind and win the game against the defending champions at that part of the season, I just think it was massive. I was lucky enough to be there that night, and it was incredible atmosphere. I don't think anyone can quite believe it, to be honest, given where Lazio were. That game came between the 3-0 loss at Bologna and the 4-1 loss in Verona. So it was a weird time of the season, but for me, I think it was probably the best Lazio performance.
Shawn, do you agree with Alasdair?
No, I go with the derby, and for a couple reasons. Besides the fact that it's a derby, and that always, obviously, that goes to your heart more than your head. But I think when you look at the fixtures at that time, we were facing a 4-match winless streak, and so such a pivotal moment in our schedule. And ultimately, you look at where the table ended up falling, and that was it. That match right there, ultimately. And while they're all important and they add up, I think that right there was a big moment in turning our season around. And I think, when we think about this derby in moments that last forever, you think about certain moments, right? You think about Gaza scoring against Roma, and I think this was a match that made Pedro, a cult hero for however long and whatever else he does for Lazio. I think he's always going to be remembered now as a Laziale, and scoring in that match. And it was a pretty decisive match. I know the scoreline says 3-2, but I remember it being much more decisive, a match for us. And so him playing a part in that, knowing that that'll go down in history, and then seeing how the table ultimately ended up playing out, that match right there was the difference between fifth and sixth. So for me, I go with the derby.
I have to go with Inter Milan, because that's the only victory we had against a top 14 this season, which tells you that we have some problems there, because we lost against Milan, we lost against Napoli, we lost and we drew away against Juventus. So yeah, I thought that was the best moment probably of the season for Lazio, but obviously the derby is so important, and it will always be a big memory. Even though fans 52% vote for the derby, only 39 to Lazio Inter. So, when the derby is involved, who's going to win, right? So, I think it makes sense after all. So
it's nice that pretty much every year we've got a derby on the shortlist here, because we are winning them fairly regularly now.
I would say that probably the most disappointing match was the other derby, where we lost without playing pretty much, right? That was probably the most disappointing match of the season. Maybe even the Milan-Lazio one. No, probably the derby was the worst one.
Yeah, just inventing a new category at the end here.
The worst performance. I think this is it, right? We did our awards. I'm missing something. No, right?
No, those are the awards. Well done. You remembered all of them.
Thank you. My memory is still there. But the season is over, but the transfer market is starting. So we're gonna be back with plenty of rumors, hopefully signing, and news about Lazio. What are you doing, Alasdair? Are you hiding? I don't know. Anyway, we mentioned Luis Felipe leaving the club. Leiv as well left the club. He did an interview today saying that Lazio will always be in his heart, that maybe he's going to come back. I don't know in which role. Seeing how the Lazio structure is, I don't see anything like that happening. Pepe Reina is saying he renewed his contract for 1 more year, saying that this could be his final season. Strakosha left. So there are plenty of players Lazio need to sign this summer. It's going to be a very complicated summer, Shawn. I don't know if you agree with me. We need 6-7 players at least.
Can I just just to finish it off, I was going to say, if we could try and think of, for each of us, what the single most important thing is for next season, to throw it forward a bit. So, Shawn, if there's one thing that you would definitely get this summer, what would it be?
In terms of a position, or if there's one player?
No, I don't mean just transfer market. It could be anything. Anything to do with Lazio.
Well, I think we talked about it before we went on live. An entire overhaul of the front office, which I think would only come with a new owner, and I think a new mentality, a more progressive way of thinking. And I think that's what's needed to take this club from where they've been for so long, which hats off to Lotito. He took them from the depths of despair and took them to a place where they're consistently competing for European spots. But I think in order to make that next step, there's got to be some sort of a shakeup, one that won't come, I believe, with Lotito at the helm. So, something that we're likely not to see anytime soon. But if we're wishing, that would be it.
Vittorio?
Do you want to go first?
Well, I would say, well, I'd love that to happen as well. I don't see it happening, sadly. But I think single most important thing for me would probably be to give Sarri what he wants, because there is no point in abandoning this plan, this project now, having been a year in, and as we all said, on the pitch it's been relatively stable. But if there's going to be another disastrous transfer market, it's really going to throw things up in the air with Sarri and his future. And obviously we've been hearing about this contract extension for ages. But I just think that they need to back him. They need to trust him and say, look, his first year has gone well. So he is now in a position where he can say, this is what I want, go and get it for me.
But if he wants, let's say he wants, he's going to want a number of things just for purposes of this conversation. If you're Il Lotito, what's the one thing you're granting him?
To get the players he needs.
Well, yeah, but he's need a lot of players. Is there one position? Is there one player that you would grant him? Because I don't see us granting him everything. But what's the one for you that has to happen above all others?
The defense, of course. Rebuild the defense. They have to. They have to. It's ridiculous. Lazio have the second best attack in Serie A this year, and their defense is like lower mid-table in terms of goals conceded. It's embarrassing, really, how bad it's been. So that is obviously the priority. But I think I actually mean everything. I mean, I think if Sarri says, I need 6 players, I need 2 centre-backs, a left-back, a regista, a vice mobile, and a goalkeeper, then go and get him that. It's not his problem how they do it. There are deals out. There's free transfers. There's loads of players out of contract. There's players in teams that have just been relegated. There's like cheap deals in smaller leagues. I don't care how you do it, but if that's what he wants, find a way with the budget you've got to get him it. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I know it's not as easy as that, but
given the track record, that's why I say
and do that. Lazio have not been good at doing this, but it is possible.
So I will mention the only thing you forgot to mention. Keep Sergej Milinkovic-Savic, because he's the best player by far in Italy, but probably one of the best in Europe. So if you could sign 6-7 players and keep Sergej, I think next year it would be a terrific Lazio. And I would say, if you have to, you can sell Luis Alberto. I'm fine with that. If you keep Sergej and you give me a good goalkeeper, because it has to be good, 1 or 2 good central defender. I mean, I would wish for 2, but even if you give me 1 very good and 1 decent, I'm fine with that. A regista, because we don't have Leiva, and a vice immobile who's decent. I know it's not going to be great, but decent vice immobile. And you keep me Sergej. I honestly think that next year we can definitely fight for the 4th place with Maurizio Sarri, obviously. So, it's a lot.
I know you guys are going to go into some of the specific transfers, so I won't mention the specific names here, but of the names you're hearing, because we've been linked to a lot, but there's names out there, whether it's, you guys know the names. Is that enough? Are you happy with the names that we're currently being linked to?
Well, I would say 95% yes. I'm a little bit concerned about the vice immobile because if the name is Cabral, we already saw him, and I don't think it's the perfect fit.
What if the name is Caputo?
Same thing with Caputo. I mean, he's very old, 35 he's turning. So, I would wish for a youngster. So the other one, I'm fine. Marcos Antonio, perfect. Romagnoli, perfect. Carnesecchi, perfect. Even Schuss, that is not a great central defender. I'm fine. He's young. But Caputo or Cabral, even Mertens, I have to say, I don't think Mertens is going to come. I'm totally honest. He's going to ask too big a salary. But yeah, we need a good vision mobile. We saw it this year, right? When Ciro missed, Lazio was on the same team.
Yeah. Well, we can save our main Calcio Mercato for next week. But yeah, there's so much to discuss. That's why we're doing a separate podcast. But I thought you were going to mention season tickets, Vittorio. That's surely another priority. Actually, sell some of those would be nice. But maybe you're sick of talking about this, shaking your head.
I mean, we mentioned it before going live. I was reading that Roma sold 21,000, I think, season tickets. Inter 19 and Milan 15. They started like 3 weeks ago, and Lazio still. I read that this week Lazio will have a meeting between the marketing team and Lotito to decide the prices. I mean, you decide today the prices. I mean, the season finished 3 weeks ago. What were you doing afterwards? I mean, what's the marketing team doing? Last match, you had like 53,000 people at the match. The day afterwards, you should have opened the season ticket. So everybody, after Saturday, would have gone and do the season ticket for the year afterwards because they were all excited, etc. Instead, you wait 1 month. Maybe I'm on holiday, and I said, yeah, I'm going to do it later. I'm enjoying a little bit of the beach, etc. I mean, this is the basic of marketing.
I mean, we're getting ready to do them in Charlotte, and we're, haven't even hit the midway point in our season. So, crazy.
Yeah. Bring a new owner, Shawn, please save us.
One day.
Good.
Well, guys, I think we can wrap it up here. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, for listening. Remember, we are on Twitch, Lazio World. We are on YouTube, Spotify, Spreaker, Amazon, wherever you listen to our podcast, you can find us there. So rate and review the podcast, subscribe if you love. And we're going to be back next week, maybe, hopefully, talking about the season ticket starting and maybe some signing. Who knows? Thanks, Alasdair, for joining me. And especially thanks, Shawn, for joining us. You're always welcome.
Cheers.
Ciao.
Ciao, everybody. Bye.